Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream I do a couple of times a week where we talk about everything to do with job search and careers, but usually the more unsavory part of it, not just the theory of how it's supposed to work, the way it actually does work, complete with fake jobs, ghosting, rude recruiters, the whole thing, incompetence, the stuff that people actually have to deal with. And this is a live Q&A, so if you're seeing my face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. Get in the chat box and let me know what's up with you, if you're wondering anything or struggling with anything, and I'll do my best to help you out. As always, a shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members and my Patreons and my super thanks donors. You guys are awesome. And to you, my participants, thank you for being here. I don't have anything to monologue about, anything to talk about. I'm simply here responding to your questions. So get in the chat and we can talk about things. The title of this particular episode is called Confusion and Disrespect, the Real Side of Job Interviews. And this is episode 64 of Honest HR Nitrous. Hopefully you've noticed the beautiful new thumbnail that I created for it, because I'm so amazing at graphic design and original too. You might have noticed that. That's a new thumbnail this week. After 64 episodes, I got around to replacing the thumbnail. Yeah, so let's talk about that. I mean, job interviews for most people, you've probably encountered bad job interviews where you go down and you talk to somebody and it's all in good faith and they say something either ridiculously blunt or just disrespectful. It would not be the first time that that's happened. That's actually becoming increasingly common. Or simply the way that they're dealing with you is either explicitly or implicitly disrespectful or condescending or, a whole variety of other things. The problem with this situation, something that I noticed in my early career, was that the thing is that a lot of recruiters, at least in my experience, or the ones that I dealt with, and I know from hearing you guys' feedback, is that I know a lot of you guys are experiencing this, just because of the nature of their role, where they have a lot of people going cap in hand to them, that they take full advantage of that. They can be incompetent, they can be disrespectful. Nobody calls them on it. At least that's the way it seems. And they certainly seem to act that way. And I've encountered that a few times. And I know based on things people have told me on this YouTube channel that a lot of other people have been dealing with that kind of stuff too. For a start, things like issues like ghosting have been thoroughly discussed. About 10 years ago, we started talking about this because it was starting to become a thing. And, it certainly has evolved to the point where now it's like the new normal. Instead of, perhaps giving you more honest news and saying, I'm sorry, we're not moving ahead or something like that. Instead, people will say things like, I'll get back to you, or they'll tell you something very encouraging, very promising, and then they just drop off the face of the earth and you can't raise them. They will not respond to an email or a DM. They will not respond to social media messages. They will not respond to a voicemail or a phone call or anything. They just, that's it. And, it's, on one hand, I think I understand it because I understand what their position is. I know that some recruiters have gotten in trouble because they've revealed honestly why they decided against a candidate or something like that. But, that's not a justification for behaving this way to people. It's just very disrespectful. You would not get people in the sales department, for example, treating the public this way as a general rule, because it reflects on the organization. But yet, for some reason, the HR department always seems to get a free pass. That's what I've noticed. They're also dealing with the public. They're dealing with candidates who are members of the public, and there's doing this kind of thing, which people would get let go for in the sales department sometimes. And no one seems to mind, So I don't know if that's ever happened to you before, you've noticed that. So, yeah. Get in the chat. I'm simply here killing time, waiting for you guys to send me any questions or comments. I'm here to respond to questions and comments. If you are watching this stream on a phone or a device or on a computer, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. YouTube is increasingly being watched on TV, so you can relax in your living room or something and watch these kind of things on TV. So I imagine it's a little bit more challenging to post questions when you're doing that. But if you are able to comment, if you are a subscriber to my channel, get in the chat box. Let me know what's up. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about disrespect. You know, this idea that like I can act any way I want as a recruiter or as an interviewer. And I mean, hiring managers are not exempted from this either. You get a lot of entitled hiring managers that don't understand how to act appropriately in a job interview. They say some very rude things. They do some very rude things. You know, very condescending, sometimes very arrogant. You know, this kind of thing, and they get away with it. And it's very unfortunate, and it's sort of setting a very bad example for how to behave. You know what I mean? Reese is here. Reese, first of all, gets the award for the first person in the chat today. So congratulations, Reese. You're a winner, and you won a free virtual handshake from me. So that would be something like that. Right? Right on. Reese says, what's it like knowing you're on our TVs live? I don't know. I think, man, it says something about the state of TV today, doesn't it? If my big fat face is like what you'd rather watch than some kind of like action movie from the 80s or something like that, you know, that's saying something. Or maybe that stuff is just too hard to find. I like movies from the 80s. That's the you know, the peak period for me, just for me personally. Probably had something to do with the fact that I sort of came of age in the 80s and, you know, this kind of thing. But no, they knew how to have fun back then. Something I think we've kind of lost, you know. Amaze says, I followed up with a recruiter after the first interview. Then I interviewed with the hiring manager a few weeks later. Would you recommend following up again? Such a slow process. Listen, there's no harm in following up. You know, I would follow up only for interviews as opposed to applications. People have asked me before, like, should I follow up with like job applications? I would say no. You know, like unless it's like a rare exception, like a dream job, you know, you're really, really hoping will work out, then maybe sure. But for interviews, I think you should follow up as a default thing for every interview you do. Okay? Within 24 hours, just a brief note. Okay? And if you're going to do it, what I recommend is try to make it like not generic. You know, don't just say, thank you very much, it was an honor to meet you, you know, blah, blah. You know, that stuff is fine, but you can really get bonus points if you go a little bit beyond. And what I mean by that is everybody loves a compliment, okay? Not a random compliment, not some ingratiating thing, but they probably did something, some little thing that you appreciated while you were there. Maybe they offered you a drink when you got there, or maybe they offered to take your coat, or they showed you where, you know, there's the washrooms, that's where you hang up your coat. If you wait here, then we'll come and get you in about 10 minutes. You know, like something like that. They kind of treated you with respect in some way, or they did something for you. So if that's what they did, there's one little thing you remember. They're like, oh yeah, it was nice of them to do that. Tell them that in the follow-up. Say, I really appreciated how you took the time to do this. You know, that was much appreciated. Not many people do that. You guys did it. I thought it was great. You know, it sort of is a statement of maybe the positive culture at your organization or something like that. You know, but it's genuine and it's non-standard to say something like that. And if you follow up, I think that just having a little thing like that in there, that justifies the communication. And it can give you some bonus points, as it were. Okay, so I do recommend following up for every interview you do, and including that if you possibly can. Alex says, why some recruiters don't offer clear, precise transport details to the job? Because they're dumb and they're privileged, and they don't seem to have an awareness of the situation of being a candidate. That's what I would say. Now, there's always exceptions to that. There's some good recruiters out there, but there's a hell of a lot of bad ones, and there's quite a few inconsiderate ones, and that's what's kind of the theme of this episode today. I've signed the contract today, and in 2nd of May I start, but I need to go with public bus transport for the first day. Okay. And it says from the following days I can use company bus though. Okay. Yeah. Listen, I would just drop that piece of information to them. So I don't know if it's too late already, if you've already talked to them, but if you're talking to them and saying, okay, I'm all set for my first day, I'm just to confirm, I'm going to be here at this time. And just so you know, I'm going by public bus. So I'm making every effort to get there on time, and I'm giving myself leeway, but should anything happen, it's probably because I'm on a public bus. I'm not an expert at taking the public transportation or something like that. You could just let them know that, right? Starting tomorrow, I'm sure it'll work much smoother. Amaze says, follow up, I've had 2 interviews already. I have other interviews going on and trying to decide intelligently in case there are multiple offers concurrently. Okay, well, good. I wish you every success, Amaze. Sounds like you got some things happening, and that's always good. It's interesting. I know this isn't directly relevant, but it kind of is the same thing. In the world of startups, and investors, they can, depending on details, they can fund multiple startups. And the ones that tend to work out are the ones that you tend to hear a steady stream of news from. Because if there's always something happening with them, that usually means they're going places, right? It's the startups that, weeks and weeks and weeks go by and you don't hear any updates. There's no real news. There's no real things going on. Those are usually the ones that fail. So the fact that you've got stuff in the pipeline, that's really good. And for everybody who's watching this and might not have stuff in the pipeline, ask your questions, and I'd like to help you out, and let's get something in the pipeline. Lovulo says, hi, sir. I recall a panel pressing me repeatedly about my salary expectations. I chose not to provide any specific number, but they were very persistent, which made the situation quite confusing. We talked about salary an hour ago. That was the theme of the last live stream I did earlier today. Listen, if they ask again, this is a common thing, especially for relatively new people that haven't done this a lot. You might have an answer prepared for a question, right? So they ask the question in the interview, and then you give the answer that you've been rehearsing. And you think, great. And then the problem is they say, well, but we still need an answer to this question. And then they ask the question again. And then a lot of people think, especially young people, they think oh no, I didn't rehearse this. It's I've already given my answer, but my answer wasn't good enough. They're asking me again, what do I say now? Right? Here's what you do. Okay, especially for questions like the salary expectations or what's your greatest weakness or any of those questions that are trap questions. It's not a good question where they're giving you the floor and you're allowed to sort of make your pitch. These are bad questions. This is we're trying to entrap you, and now you have to wiggle out of it, right? And you've given us your answer, but in some way we've said no, that's not good enough. And then they ask you the question again, right? Here's what you do. You give your answer again. You give the same answer again, but with a smile on your face. So for example, they say, what's your salary expectations? And you say something like, well, to be honest, it's kind of really early in this process. Like I know the job description, I know the job posting, but I don't know any other details of this job. I would need to know a lot more details before I could really give you an accurate answer on that. Right? So I can't say at this point. There's your answer, right? And they say, okay, yeah, fair enough. We understand that. We realize this early, but listen, the way it works for us, our process is we need to know what are your salary expectations, right? So they ask you it again. And you say, well, listen, I understand that, but like I've just explained, unfortunately, I really can't give you that. Not at the moment because it's very early. I only know the job description and very little else, including some really important things I would need to be able to make a determination on that. So I'd just be pulling a number out of the air right now. So like I said, I can't really say at this point. Hopefully that makes sense. They get the same answer again. And that's the only thing that they're going to get. It doesn't matter how many times they ask the question. That's their answer. It's not my fault that you're not satisfied with it. But I'm saying it in a very pleasant way because I'm not creating awkwardness around this. A lot of people feel social pressure. Oh no, I gotta do better. It's like, no, you don't. If the answer is you can't say, the answer is you can't say. And you know that just going off script and pulling a number out of the air and saying it is going to hurt you, right? That's the situation. That's what they want. So I'm sorry, I'm wriggling out of this trap. Like I've stated, unfortunately, I can't say at this moment. I'm ready for the next question. You try to... Do you call that a smile? A smile is like that. It's not really a smile. It's just you're looking pleasant, friendly, and approachable. Just like this, right? I'm trying to look friendly, pleasant, and approachable, right? Even to people that are being rude and condescending and inappropriate, because I'm not the one causing any kind of awkwardness here. I'm being fully pleasant and accommodating. So remember that. They may try this in job interviews to apply social pressure to you, to get you to answer a question that either is bad for you or is inappropriate, or it's even illegal for them to ask. They'll put pressure on you to answer it. Don't fall into that trap. Just give the same answer again, only this time with an even bigger smile. If you do mock interviews, like with a friend or family member, where you do pretend job interviews as practice to prepare you to do like a job interview, you could even say like, don't be too shy to play a little hardball with me. I need to be prepared for those kind of situations too. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I see there's 24 people here. Get in the chat. Let me know what's up with you and what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. And I will do my best to help you out. I'm going to ride the brightness of my camera here. Can never be too heavenly, shall we say. Yeah, I have been using the same computer setup for coming on to, I think it's 14 years. So it's the same gear that I used to start my channel like 6 years ago or whatever it was. And it's starting to get a bit dated, shall we say. So I'm hoping to upgrade all my stuff this year. I have to get into that. But I don't have like an auto brightness on my cameras or anything. So it's just, you got to do it manually. Yeah, get in the chat. Let me know what's up with you guys, and I will do my best to answer your question. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the next question, check out that course. It's my Get Hired course. If you want all my advice all in one place, with templates and, processes and all that kind of stuff, check out that course. Very popular course. I've sold quite a bit of those. A lot of people have been very much helped by it. And I've done FAQ videos. I've done a video about exactly how the course works, so you can see exactly what it is and what you're getting into before you make a decision on it. So that and the course itself, they're all linked in the description box under this live stream. So check those out. Yeah. So coming back to who was it that was asking about TV? Reese was asking about TVs. So if you're watching this on a TV, I'm assuming you don't have like a keypad at your disposal, right, to just sort of chat, right? I've never watched YouTube on a TV, so I wouldn't know, but that's my assumption. So let me know if that's correct or not, if you would. Just curious. Yeah. I mean, what are some situations that you've had to deal with to do with disrespect in a job interview or anything like that? Or something you're confused about? They ask you a confusing thing or they do a confusing thing? Maybe let me know about that. I've heard all stories, all types of disrespect, all types of inappropriate questions or just silly questions, condescending questions that people have a hard time dealing with. Let me know in the chat. If you're a subscriber to my channel, you should be able to get in the chat. Lovulo says, what key factors should one consider when being headhunted by a recruiter for a small or newly established company? Any thoughts, Mr. Bill? What key factors should one consider? That's pretty damn general, Lovulo. I don't know what you're referring to. You should be qualified for the role. You should have all the soft skills. You should be somewhat rehearsed and prepared for the job interview. So if you haven't done a job interview in a while, you will want to bone up on it. To me, it's like a two-phase process. Phase one is when you figure out the answers to common questions and, sort of get your position in a row. Like, what are you going to say when they ask you about different things? All the behavioral questions, like you prepare 10 stories based on your experiences from the past, right? And you kind of vet those. So phase one is when you learn all that stuff, you try to memorize it, right? Phase two is when you actually do practice interviews, right? Mock interviews. Now, if you're an executive or you've got a lot of money to throw around, you can hire an HR company, like a recruitment company, to provide that service for you. They'll bring you down and, you pay money and they will do practice interviews. Not only do you get to rehearse, but then they get to, they give you feedback, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that all feedback is accurate, but, you get feedback from a professional recruiter in, they give you little bits of advice and tips and things like, try and do this, try not to mention that, instead mention it like this, or don't mention it at all. They'll give you little tips and they'll work with you and you get to rehearse with them, right? Now, for most people, you don't need to pay for this. If you have, a family member or, a friend, you can get them to help you. Like give them a list of questions, or you say, go make up your own questions and then you be the interviewer and you interview me and we're going to do this like it's real, okay? And it's so that I get some practice doing this. I believe I memorized all the answers and I think I know what I'm doing, but let's just find out, right? Now, if you trust them, they can maybe give you feedback, but the primary purpose of this is so that you practice, right? If you do 3 or 4 of these a day for, say, 2 weeks, like 10 days, 10 weekdays, right? That's 40 practice interviews in 2 weeks. At the end of 40 practice interviews, you're going to know your stuff. You're going to know the questions backwards, forwards. They'll be burned in here. So when you go to a real job interview, and they ask you a lot of these questions again, you'll know what to say, right? You'll have been through it several times. You'll be comfortable with it. You're never going to be perfectly 100% comfortable, but you'll be mostly comfortable. You'll be a lot more comfortable than you would be otherwise. So that's a really good way to prepare. Now, you put in a little bit of work for 2 weeks and you got this down. So for most people, that's going to be worth it. If you don't do that, then you end up learning the same kind of stuff, but you learn it by screwing up actual job interviews. That's the way it usually works out. So instead of making all your mistakes at the interviews and blowing jobs, potentially because of it, you just make all your mistakes at home in practice interviews, and then you get all that out of the way, and then you perform much better when you're doing the real thing. Amaze says, how would you handle a situation where you've already accepted one offer for one company, but then receive a new offer from another company that's 35% higher? How would you navigate that dilemma? What dilemma? Amazed. There is no dilemma. Okay? What if someone says, listen, Mr. or Ms. Amazed, congratulations, I have a job offer for you. The salary is $1 million a year with the possibility of another $4 million bonus potential every year. But unfortunately, I can see that you're already employed, so I guess you won't be accepting this, right? You're always open. You're always open to something that makes sense, right? Just so you know, employers have no real loyalty to you. They act purely in their self-interest. That's how you need to act too. They're the ones that are setting that precedent. You know what I mean? They're the ones that are in business. They're the ones that understand, what is in their own business interests, right? So they're leading the charge on that. And I know what I'm talking about. I've led businesses. And, you know what I mean? So any kind of loyalty or anything like that, I hate to say it, not to sound harsh, but it's an illusion. There is no real loyalty or like personal loyalty between an employer and an employee, right? So if you get a job offer and you accept it and you start working at that job, and then 2 weeks later, you get another job offer from a different company that pays you 35% more, okay? Now, there's no real dilemma because the way this is going to end, assuming that that second offer is legitimate, the way this is going to end is you're going to end up making 35% more at least, okay? So you have some options before you. You can quit your job, let's call it at company A, and take the offer at company B that's 35% higher. Or you can go to your current employer in company A and you could say, listen, I love working here. I want to stay working here, but I've just received an offer for 35% more from a competing company. Now, can you match it? Because my first choice would be to stay here, but as I'm sure you will understand, I have to follow the money. And if these people are going to pay me 35% more, I have no choice but to entertain that. But I'm giving you the opportunity to match it because I would prefer to stay here, right? And just see what they say. Now, if they say, you know what, we can't match that, it's going to be hard to lose you. You say, listen, no hard feelings. I really appreciate the fact that you took a chance on me and I would have loved to stay. This is a great company. And I hope that, one day I will have a chance to work here again. If things work out for the both of us, I really hope that happens. Best of luck, right? And then you take the other offer, right? You know what I mean? Don't give them the details of your offer. I already said this on my previous live stream. Don't say it's from this company that's offering 35% more and it's with this person I'm dealing with. Don't say any of that, okay? Because it has been known that people can sabotage a job offer if they wanted to. So you don't want to give them the ability to do that if they're that type of person, right? But, you don't have to prove anything to them. The fact that you have received the offer, that's enough for you. It's not about convincing anyone else. You're just asking them, right? So that's how I'd handle it. There's no real dilemma. You're always open to something that makes sense to you. You know, the only thing that you would do is you would just sometimes give your current employer an opportunity to match whatever offer you get. But other than that, you follow the money and you follow your heart. Wherever it is that you want to work and whatever employer will pay you more, hey, it's all good. There's no dilemma. Lovulo says, great advice, thank you. You're absolutely welcome, Lovulo. I wish you all the best. And if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to ask. We're down to the end of the chat. There's 26 people here. Thank you for joining me. If you're just joining now, get in the chat. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. I'll do my best to help you out. In the absence of any questions, while we're waiting for more questions to roll in, check out my courses. Check out this course. All my advice in one place, geared especially towards introverts like myself. What that course does is it teaches you how to get a job in the posted job market. It also teaches you how to get a job in the hidden job market. And it's geared towards introverts. So if you're like me, if you're a technical introvert, then you should do well with some of the techniques that I introduce in that course. For those of you who want to go further, you're not necessarily looking for a job right now, but you want to climb the ladder. You want to get promoted. You want to be seen as a viable contender for management positions and things like this. Okay, if that's what you're looking to do, or you're trying to sort of go up the organizational chart, check out this course. Okay, that's a course where what I did is I put all the knowledge that I gained climbing the ladder, basically, in terms of how to communicate, I put it all in that course. That's a course that teaches you communication skills. It teaches you above average communication skills. It's all the stuff that managers have to kind of learn to do, generally speaking, that employees, like workers, don't. So I put it all in one place. There's several things you usually have to tack on if you're climbing the ladder. One of them is people management skills. Another one is financial skills. And then a third one is this, communication skills. So this is the communication skills component. Okay, it's called Write Like a Professional. It is about writing, but it's mainly about what to say, how to respond to things. So if you are looking for that, check that out. That's quite a popular course recently too. A lot of people are buying that and checking it out, and they're being helped by it. So if that's what you're looking to do, that's where I put all my learning on that. Reese says, what kind of questions does a recruiter ask during a phone screening? I have a phone call set up with a recruiter today. Well, usually what they would do is they'd ask you the standard job interview questions, and there's about 10 of those, right? So, tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why did you leave your last job? How do you, there's other ones too. You can go further afield. How do you handle stress? What are your salary expectations? That's a big one. Do you have any questions for us? All those are standard, right? Now, what may throw you off is that they don't always use those words to phrase the question, right? So, for example, instead of saying, what are your strengths? They might say, why do you want this job? Right? It's exactly the same question, believe it or not. Because how do you answer, what are your strengths? Well, you say things about yourself that you consider to be good, right? Like that an employer would want. How do you answer, why do you want this job? Right? The answer to that is the same answer. It's, well, you'd say things about yourself that an employer would like, right? I want this job because I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. It seems like a good fit, Right? So they're going to ask you those standard questions. So the first thing you should do is like learn the answers to those standard questions. Okay. I mean, I've got videos on pretty much every one of those. There's a lot of other people that have videos and articles and all kinds of resources on answering those. Then the other type of question they're going to ask you is a behavioral based question, right? A behavioral question is, it's not like the standard interview questions. The behavioral question is not asking a general thing. It's asking about some story from your past. They'll say, tell me about a time when you did this. Tell me about a time you dealt with a conflict. Tell me about a time you failed at something and had to sort of handle that. Tell me about a time you showed creativity on the job. Tell me about a time that, you earned your boss's trust by doing something really well. Like, these are all tell me about a time questions. They're behavioral questions. Everybody's answer is going to be different because everybody has different experiences, right? Now, the problem with these questions is that there's an infinite number of these questions out there, right? I could say, tell me about a time that you showed creativity in a situation that you had only just learned about and weren't really familiar with it, but it allowed you to earn the respect of your coworkers. Tell me about a time you did that. You see, I just made up a custom behavioral question off the top of my head. So there's an infinite number of these, right? If you go to Google and you say behavioral questions and then enter a job like project manager, behavioral questions, graphic designer, whatever, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's like so many, right? It's impossible to sort of like memorize an answer for each one. So you can't take that approach. So the way you handle these is you sort of do it backwards. Instead, you memorize 10 stories from your past that show different things. So 5 of them could be your most shining accomplishments, right? And then another 5 could be like special situations, dealing with conflict, dealing with creativity, dealing with stress, dealing with, coworkers, dealing with a misunderstanding, right? Or a time you missed a deadline, things like this, right? And you vet these stories. You make sure that they're appropriate to tell in a job interview. They're not going to raise any red flags by what you're saying. You practice saying them in a very compact form, like the STAR format, or there's, CAR format. There's other ones too. And then whatever behavioral questions they ask you in a job interview, the way you handle it is you pull out one of those 10 stories, whichever one it's kind of the closest to, and then you tell that story. You might have to tweak the words a little bit so it matches up with the question a little bit better, but it'll be an answer for it, right? So that's what you do. Okay, that's how you prepare. And if you do that, you have your behavioral questions down and you have your standard job interview questions down, you're doing pretty well. Like you're gonna do at least halfway decently. Okay, it's just a matter at that point of like practicing and remembering, the answers and being able to remember them when you've got people staring at you and stuff like that, right? Hopefully that helps. Now I know you've got a screening interview later today, so I don't know if you can do all of that today, but that's kind of the stuff they'll ask. They don't ask like, wildly off the wall questions generally. I mean, you always get exceptions, but you know what I mean? Usually the way it works is that, maybe about one question every interview, it'll be something you never thought of, and that's just how it goes, Don't stress out over it. It'll be fine. A sort of good sort of catch-all answer or fallback answer is to talk about how you meet the job requirements, right? So if they said they were looking for someone with this education, this experience, and these skills, a good fallback answer for anything you don't know actually how to answer is basically referring back to those and saying like, well, the fact that I have this education and this experience and these skills usually can get me through that situation or, whatever it is they were asking about, right? So you do all that, and you're going to be fine. Lovulo says, another question, sir. If you have freelance experience but are bound by a non-disclosure agreement, how can you effectively highlight that experience without revealing client identities? You don't have to reveal a client's identity to talk about the work you did for them. Like, you may not be able to go into real granular detail about the nature of the work, but you could certainly speak about it. You could say, like, I've dealt with that in the industry that I was in for many years, which was like industrial services and stuff, sending technicians to fix industrial equipment and all this. It's like, you can't disclose the customer, but you can say, like, we've been on site and we've serviced that kind of equipment or equipment similar to that on site, by doing this test and that test and that test and using these techniques and those techniques and these tools, right? So, I mean, you can certainly talk about what you've done without disclosing who it was for, right? Usually non-disclosure agreements, they talk about like the real finely granulated data, like very specific names, dates, numbers, stuff like that. If you're just saying we regularly do this type of work, that's not violating any kind of non-disclosure. There's no confidential information that you're disclosing there. Okay, so it shouldn't affect it. As long as you don't name names, you can still say everything you need to say. At least, in every situation I've dealt with. Lovulo says, is this experience worth mentioning in the context of a full-time formal employment? I can't answer that. That depends on what they're asking you about. It would probably be good to mention what you've done, right? You just can't go into names and dates and, numbers, right? Amaze says, thanks, Bill. I'm just trying to avoid burning bridges, especially with nice people. Then I'm aware that employers usually prioritize their own interest above any employees. Yeah, well, they're just like everyone else in the same way that employees prioritize their own interests above the employers, right? If you have to decide whether money goes into your pocket or your employer's pocket, usually you're going to put it into your pocket, right? You're not going to work for free. You're not going to do things out of the kindness of your heart that for a company that serve absolutely no advantage to you whatsoever. You know what I mean? So everyone behaves this way, right? And the reason I'm saying this is because they're certainly behaving this way. You should too, It's good to be loyal. It's good to value friendships and all that. So let's make no mistake. You have an agreement with them to provide your time in exchange for money. It's a business arrangement. And everyone needs money to survive in one way, shape, or form. So, you know what I mean? It's a question of survival, I suppose, really. So yeah, they're acting in their own self-interest. If they don't, they go under. They go bankrupt, and then all the employees get laid off anyway. You have to look out for yourself. Now, if you can partner with these people and have a mutually beneficial arrangement, then that's good for everybody. But the moment it stops making sense to you, then you don't want to persist with it. You want to try and, change things up so that you get something out of it. I think a lot of people, especially young people, they've been in school so long that it's the illusion that when they start working for an employer, it almost feels like they're back in school. I do what the teacher says because I'm conditioned to do what an authority figure tells me to do, especially when they get all up in my face and they order me and they're kind of forceful. I've learned that I should just sort of conform, So there you go. Reese says, I've done other prep work. He didn't call it an interview, so I didn't know what to expect. Okay, well, is it an interview? If it's an interview, it's an interview. I don't care what they call it. Are they deciding whether to engage you on some arrangement based on what you say in this meeting then it's an interview. It's essentially a job interview, you know? You're welcome, Reese. Okay. Yellow Nun Sister says, hello, Bill. Living in Texas is making me go broke. I've used an AI resume writer for 2 months, making things specific for companies' positions as described. I've included my status as a nun under volunteer activities. The only job I've gotten in the past 2 months is part-time remote surveys for $10 per hour. I asked you the question about including none or disabilities on my resume before. I included them, and people are very obviously discriminating against my 10 years in a call center. Okay. So what's the question? Should you include none or disabilities on your resume? Listen, okay, this is what I would say, because any kind of issue like this, if you've been doing this for a while and you're getting nowhere, and you highly suspect it's because of this particular thing you're putting on your resume, okay? What I would suggest is just don't, I mean, this sounds self-evident, but just don't put that thing on your resume. See if your fortunes change. If you suspect that they're not responding to you because you put the word none or you mentioned disabilities, apply for the job without that on your resume and just see if things go any different. Now, if all of a sudden you're starting to get a lot more callbacks and things, then that tends to suggest that obviously it was that thing that you changed. That was the change you made that led to that, right? Now, look, obviously you would like to be above board. You'd like to be forthright, you know, and it's not like you're hiding anything. It's just a question of at what point should you disclose things, right? Now, the way this process works is, you know, this is part of a larger problem that everybody has, right? I have said a principle several times on this channel. I think I've even said it today in my last live stream. And that is that the hiring process has different stages, right? Certainly you've got the application stage, then you've got the interview stage, then you have the offer stage, right? Now, there might be multiple interviews and like, you know, all this kind of stuff, but at least you'll probably have those 3 stages, right? At the minimum. So what a lot of people do is they always think about the end of the process. So when they're applying for the job, they think, oh, it's only fair that you should know that I'm a nun, or you should know this, or I have this question, you know, do you provide free parking? You know, like this kind of, because you're thinking about the very end when you get the job, right? Now, what I'm saying is, here's my advice. Only think about the stage of the process that you're at and be single-mindedly focused on simply making it to the next stage. Okay? Don't think about the end. Don't be thinking about trying to make it to the end. Just think about trying to get to the next stage of the process, right? So if you're at the application stage, your only goal should be to get an interview. Okay? So if you don't absolutely need to disclose you're a nun, or if you don't absolutely need to disclose disabilities, or whatever the issue is, you know, at that stage, and you think it might be holding yourself back, don't. And see if that gets you more interviews. Okay? And you know what I'm saying? Like, if that's what you suspect, then do that. And then when you go to the interview, same thing applies. Don't think about the end, you know, when you're starting work and you're an employee and, you know, all this sort of stuff. Just focus on like, okay, I need to get an offer. Okay, I need to get an offer. That's the only thing I'm here to do, is I'm to try to get to the next stage with this, which is where they make me an offer, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so like, for example, if you don't need to disclose, see what some people do, especially young people, they feel like, okay, listen, here's all the negative things about me that could come up eventually. So I'm going to give them all to you now at my first job interview, or I'm going to give them all to you now on my resume, on my application. So what this results in is they make a terrible first impression, right? The company is looking at 800 applications for a job, potentially. And they look at this resume. In fact, it's more likely that an ATS looks at that resume, but it starts off by saying, now listen, okay, I think it's only fair that you should know that I have this disability. And I think it's only fair that you should know that I refuse to do shift work. And I think it's only fair that you know that, I have these wants, wills, and needs. And, there was once an incident where I got mad at somebody in a previous job. And, just so you don't find out about that later, I want you to know about that now. So it's all up front and we're honest, right? So what's the end result? The end result is like, I'm just meeting this person. All I know is that they have disabilities. They had some incidents in their past. They've had arguments in their past. They don't want to do shift work. And they have all these particular wants, wills, and needs of, how their work environment should be set up. It's like, I've got 800 people to choose from here. I'm probably going to not prioritize this person as number one. I'm going to push them down to the bottom of the list, right? So the end result is that it just hurts you. You know what I'm saying? What you're doing is, welcome to hell. You're in as a nun. Well, welcome to hell. This is actually the sales process. That's what this actually is. This whole job interview thing. It's the sales process. You're selling yourself. You're basically saying to the employer, listen, all those other people you're talking to, you need to forget about them and you need to hire me. And here's why. Okay, that's basically what you're doing in a job interview. Right? So you want to make a very good first impression. You don't want to lead with anything negative or that could be seen as negative. You want to lead only with your strengths. If you only have 1 minute to tell them stuff about you, all the stuff that comes out of your mouth should be like your strengths, your positives. I have this education. I have these experiences, like this many years of experience on the things that you are looking for. I have these skills, things you've said you're looking for. I've got those. I have a great attitude. I'm easy to get along with. I'm very passionate about doing this kind of work, right? And then your minute runs out. What's the impression they're left with? They're left with this impression that, wow, this person looks pretty good. Let's shortlist them. They're one of the better ones, right? So you get moved on to the next stage of the process, and the people that led with all their negatives in the spirit of honesty and full disclosure, they didn't make it that far. So nobody ever then takes a closer look at them, right? So what I'd recommend is that you lead only with your positives. Leave your negatives out. And when you get to the offer stage, you do the same thing. And then when you start the job, you get the job in the bag first, right? Get it in the bag. Just get the job, right? And then what I suspect will probably happen is that the fact that you're a nun or the fact that you have disabilities, those probably won't be showstoppers, right? Now, if they are something important, it's better to address it when you have the job, okay? Than when you're like just one of a whole bunch of candidates that, they haven't really decided on yet, right? The odds of it working out go down, right, at that point. Okay, so that's how I'd approach it. Lead with your strengths. If there's any kind of thing that could be a negative, you don't know, just don't mention it yet. If people really want to, you could get into it later, but get the job in the bag first, then you can try and address those. If it turns out to be an absolute showstopper, it turns out to be an absolute showstopper, but, unless it's an absolute showstopper, they'll be able to deal with it, right? And you will too, and you guys can make it work. Yellow Nun Sister says, does HR have as a form I could re-sign later after getting hired that discloses disabilities in the event that I need the company's health insurance reimbursement? Listen, okay, now you're in Texas. Okay, I'm in Canada. The healthcare systems are completely different. I don't understand the US healthcare system. You guys have this weird system from my perspective where you do private medical insurance and that comes into the whole hiring process. So I don't understand it. It's completely different where I deal, what I'm familiar with. So I'm not sure how you would navigate that. But I'm sure there's some people that can assist you with that. Okay. That's some of the disadvantages of that system. If they legally need you to disclose every possible risk, like before you get employed, it kind of ties your hands a bit, doesn't it? I'm not sure how you get around that, but if worse comes to worse and you just got to survive, I would consider, if in the absence of any clear advice that can help you, if you think it's a showstopper, try it and see. I would, maybe the first stage is to not disclose any of this stuff on your application, but then when it comes to these legal documents that come in later, maybe, I don't know when they come in, you can disclose it then, but yeah, we're in two different countries, so I can't help you with that. That's particular to the US. So sorry I couldn't have been more helpful on that. And thank you for being a member, by the way. If you would like to go into it deeper with me, I can certainly make time for that. Now listen, on every second Monday, I do a collaborative live stream with a recruiter from the United States, Abby. Her name is Abby, and she's from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. And she's in the US, she's in Colorado. So she knows a lot of the labor laws, certainly in Colorado. I know that's not Texas, but I believe this stuff works quite a bit similar, across the US. So you could ask her that, or us that, and then she might be able to help. Or you could check out her channel. If she does live streams like through the week or something, you could just maybe ask her directly. I know there's other people too, but hopefully you can get an answer to that. I also believe in the US, you guys have, just like Canada, just like a lot of countries, you have government resources that are provided by the government that helps people get a job, and they helps them navigate these kind of questions. So you can maybe avail yourself of the local government resources for that. It's like some office somewhere or some building where you go, or you could phone in, or whatever. It's like a helpline. The advantage is that it's local, so it will pertain to you. But that's what I would have to say about that. There are 26 people. Get in the chat. We've reached the end of the chat, so let me know what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and I will do my best to help you out. In the meantime, as I've said before, check out my courses. I've talked about this one here, right? That's if you're wanting to get promoted at work, that kind of thing, or climb the ladder. This one here is if you're looking for a job, if you're wondering about how to get more interviews and how to get offers and things like that. Where it's really an opportunity is the hidden job market. And once again, I will encourage everyone, I will encourage Yellow Nun Sister Nicola, is that how you say that? I would encourage everyone to check out the hidden job market, learn all you can about it, okay? That's where 80% of the jobs are. They're not posted. And that's usually where the good jobs are, okay? They're not posted because they don't need to post them. They don't have a lack of people that are putting themselves forward for those. They don't have to go further and further afield to find people that would want to do that job. Okay, it's a good job, and so you usually don't need to post them, right? So the way you access those jobs is through usually some form of networking. And the method that I recommend is direct outreach. So it has absolutely nothing to do with how many people you know. That is not what we're talking about. It's simply the ability to reach out to an employer. Okay, someone that's, unless you're doing remote work, it's someone that's near you, physically near you in your hometown or your region, within commuting distance, certainly. Find out all the employers there. There's usually like a absolute ton of employers, like way more than you would think if you've never done this. And find all the employers that, would employ someone like you. They have people working for them that have the skills you have. Okay, the skill set you have. And, reaching out to them, looking like between Google Maps and LinkedIn, you can find not only the employers around you, but then you can see inside of those employers into those organizations down to the individuals that do different things, thanks to LinkedIn, right? And you can reach out to those people, you can connect with them directly, you can send them messages. So if you have a template message that you send out, basically some form of saying, hello, I have these skills, I solve this problem. If ever you're looking for someone that can do that, please let me know because I'd love to work for your company, right? If you send that out, the odds is that people are not looking to hire right now. So the majority of them won't. It won't be applicable to them. But for 5%, 10%, something like that, they just happen to be looking for someone just like you right now. And you landed right in their lap. That hiring manager was just thinking of like, I've got to fill this position. I've got to add a new person to my team. I got to start thinking about that. And then bam, your message lands in their lap, right? Saying, hey, I'm here. I can do that. I'd love to work for you. So what would you do in that situation? Well, you'd contact them. You'd say, hey, that's interesting. Maybe there's some purpose, for us to get together and just have like a brief meeting of, where this could go. You know what I mean? So that's the simplest method of getting a job in the hidden job market, especially for introverts. It's called direct outreach, right? So listen, like I always say, don't take my word for any of this. Go do your own research, go verify all this stuff. You'll see that this is indeed the case. And if you want to learn how to do that with me, that is also in that course. Okay, so check it out. I have some free videos on my YouTube channel. If this is interesting to you and you want to learn more about it, I have a free video on my YouTube channel that talks about it. I have a couple actually. And what I did is I put them in the description box, links to them in the description box of this live stream. So one's called Hidden Job Market. So if you want to learn more about that. The other one, which is probably going to be what most people would find more interesting, is called How Successful People Get Jobs. So if you check out that video, you'll see like me on my desktop. You'll see my desktop as I show you, as I walk you through how you find the employers around you, how you see inside of those organizations to the individuals, right? That's what I put in that video. So check that out and then learn all you can about this. Get your information from a variety of sources when you're doing research on this. If you don't believe me or something, a lot of younger people, they never believe this when they hear it because they've never been introduced to this before. And their heads filled with all kinds of incorrect notions, like, who am I to talk to somebody that has the power to give me a job? I can't do that. It's inappropriate for me to talk. It's not inappropriate. You just have to know what to say and how to approach people. And this is all virtually, right? They're also under the mistaken impression that the only way to get a job is to apply to a job posting online. No, most jobs are not posted, right? And this is one of the ways you find out about them. Now, don't take my word for it. You may have family members. The odds are is that, in your family, you have somebody who got a job through some kind of networking connection. They happen to, maybe they had a former coworker that had moved on to a new company and contacted them and said, hey, we're hiring here. Are you interested? Or something like that, right? So that's an example of a job that's in the hidden job market and it's accessible through networking, right? Now networking is a broad term. It means a lot of different things, right? If you're an extrovert, there's a lot of ways to do networking that involve extroverted type activities. You're doing a lot of things face to face, right? If you're an introvert, there's a lot of different type activities that a lot of them are virtual over social networking or email or things like this, that are more suited to introverts, right? I'm a technical introvert. I built a consulting company doing precisely this, that I put in my video. So, there's a lot of different activities under the umbrella of networking, right? So I've mentioned so far one just a moment ago, right? But that's one of many, right? So if you're interested in sort of getting into this world and you're an introvert like me, check it out. Someone's talking about it there. I'll just okay, but let's do this in order. So Saku is here. Saku says, "What up? What up? Thank you for your insider insight." Well, thank you. I like how you put that too. That's good. How do you say this? Iffy? Iffy says, "Hi, how about a situation where a person already chose a salary range required before an interview, but during the interview got a clear description of the role, which was way more than salary? Can they negotiate for a higher salary after receiving the offer?" Absolutely not. You are doomed to only make the amount of money that you were tricked into saying. I'm joking, Iffy. Absolutely you can. Listen. First of all, this is precisely the kind of thing I talked about on a live stream earlier today. The theme of a live stream I just did this, is not even in the morning, just in the early afternoon in North America, was salary negotiation. Okay, so I've talked all about this today already. Okay, there's a lot of things going on here. The bottom line is that it's underhanded. They're trying to trick you. You have to put in a number. We're not going to tell you anything about the jobs. We're not even going to tell you about the benefits, but you have to tell us how much salary you need, right? Does that sound kind of stupid to you? Of course it does. That's ridiculous. They're trying to fool you. They're trying to pull a fast one on you, right? So, what they do is they try and pin you down to a number and said, you're okay with, I'm okay with this amount of pay. And then they tell you, oh, by the way, this job requires 50% travel, requires you to provide your own tools, to provide your own attire. It's 50% commission, and it's mandatory overtime on holidays. Right? Now, listen, any normal, sane person is going to say, okay, well, thank you very much for letting me know this. Now that you have disclosed this, and I have a better understanding of what this position entails, I'm going to have to revise my salary expectations upward to allow for this. Now, they may, bitch and complain about this, but it's like, look, there's absolutely no deception going on. I did everything in good faith. When you asked me for my salary requirements, I responded honestly, given the information I was provided at the time. Now that you have revealed more about the position that you have in mind, I'm now responding to it and I'm revising my salary expectations based on that. Okay? It doesn't matter if they think you're reasonable or not. The bottom line is that you don't take a position for less money than it makes sense for you, right? Okay? And if they're going to play these kind of games, it's probably not going to work out anyway, right? So that's how you proceed. There's nothing, if they're going to change the game on you, it's only natural and reasonable that you would then revise your position. Okay? This is the kind of crap they try and pull on young people, people that are less experienced with this kind of thing. And you know what? They get away with it most of the time, too. They manage to get a lot of young people to work for them for far below their worth. And in that way, they are exploited. And they know full well what they're doing, too. They think that because there's a lot of applicants for these positions, it justifies them in pulling these kind of shenanigans. It doesn't. You're not a slave. You're only going to work for someone if it makes sense for you. You know what I mean? They can't pull all these mind games and get you to think that, oh, because of my sense of personal honor, I did say I would work for that amount of money. So now that they've disclosed that the job is far worse than they let on before and far more demanding, I have to stick to my original statement that I would work for that low amount of money. You don't. You don't. Okay? Remember, you're awesome and you're not a slave, and these people can only do this if you allow them. And there are a lot better employers out there. So just keep moving, okay? Investigate this, deal with them properly, but don't lose any sleep, don't shed any tears if something like this doesn't work out, because they are signaling the type of employer they are by pulling stuff like this on people. Okay? I wish you all the luck in the world, Iffy. Don't worry, you're awesome, you're gonna do well. Can they negotiate for a higher salary after receiving the offer? Absolutely. Yeah. Once again, the live stream I did this morning was all about negotiation. So if that would help you, go back and watch that. All my live streams are available on my channel. They're not deleted. So you can go back and you can, I ran through all salary negotiation, how it all works. Right. So if that helps you, you could check that out. Yellow Nun Sister Nicola says, that's the video I wanted to see last month. Okay. Yeah, how successful people find jobs. Good for you to mention it. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I put it in the description of all my live streams, I believe. Certainly this live stream, Honest HR Nitrous, and the one I did earlier today called How to Get Hired. I put it in there because I keep referring back to it. Because there's a lot of people that just don't know about this stuff. And, I did that video that kind of demonstrates a bit of what it involves. So yeah. I mean, I keep sending people to, I don't know how many people actually go and watch it, but, it's like, you see, this is the thing about YouTube. I don't know if anyone really cares about this, but just to sort of talk about this for a second. It's like, there's a difference between a good quality video and a good quality, information in the video, right? So in the past, I've done videos where I felt like I'm really giving away gold here. I'm giving away a principle that me knowing that principle or learning that principle has really, really helped me, But then the video itself isn't very popular. It gets hardly any views. And I'm thinking that's strange. It's very unfortunate. Not many people are seeing this because I feel like I'm giving away the crown jewels. If I had had a mentor or something that took me aside and told me this stuff, and they told me that, and they told me that 10 years earlier than I would have learned it, I would have made so much more money throughout the course of my life because I'd have made a lot more money sooner, or I would have gotten to a job that made me happy, a lot sooner. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of value there, but unfortunately the quality of the video as deemed by YouTube or whatever, maybe it's the wrong title or, whatever, but it's not super popular by the standards of my YouTube channel. So I keep sending people there. I don't know if anyone's actually going. There's a great book out there about introvert networking too. I'm sure there is. Iffy says, thank you very much. You're welcome, Iffy. Hopefully that was helpful. Art Sim says, how does a brand new grad that didn't get an internship find a job? Excellent question. You have several options available to you, Art Sim. Now, if you're less informed, okay, the default method, and seemingly the only method they ever tell you about in school, is you could apply for posted jobs. When that happens, you play their game. That means you go through their process to get hired. Okay? That's where you have to deal with recruiters. You go to job interviews and they control the narrative and they tell you what the process is and you just follow it, right? Sometimes in a very condescending way and in a way that, kind of sells you short a lot of the time. Okay? So that's kind of the default method. It is not the most popular method. The most popular method is networking. You see, what networking is and what you can do with it is you can hack any system. So for example, in an organization, there's a system for hiring. That's the HR's hiring process, right? That's where they post a job, usually on their company website. They control the thing. They say, here, if you want to apply for this, apply here. This is how you send in an application. This is the dates, where you can apply, and we will let you know. It goes into their ATS, their applicant tracking system that filters resumes and things like that, right? Networking, you can go around any system. So what you can actually do, and for some reason in school, they usually don't tell people this. This is a reality of the world, okay? And I discovered this in sort of more like the second part of my career, roughly, when I was in at least my 30s. It's like, first of all, it's a free country. Most countries in the world are free to a large degree. That means you can talk to whomever you want. You don't need some kind of official permission to talk to somebody. You have that right. They in turn have the right to not respond to you if they don't want to. But there's nothing that says you can't reach out to someone and ask them a question or make them aware of something, right? God knows if you have an email account, you're probably getting spam email. There's nothing preventing those people from reaching out to you, right? They're usually doing it in a totally slimy and stupid and ineffective way, right? So the way it works in a company is that usually some manager makes the decision, I need to hire someone. My group, my team that I'm responsible for them. I need to get a job done. I need to make a certain amount of money or whatever. I've got a team of 12 people. I need to add another employee. I need to have 13 people. There's too much work for us to do. So I've come to a decision. I'm willing to give up some of my budget or take some of my revenue and use it to pay for another employee, right? I've decided that manager is now classified as a hiring manager because they're a manager who's hiring, okay? Right. Now, in order to help them to find a candidate, sometimes they employ the services of a recruiter, okay? If you're in a small company, you might not have a recruiter that works internally in your company. So you'd have to hire an outside HR firm to recruit for you. In big companies, they have their own recruiters, right? So you would put in a request to the HR department to say, I got a position that looks like I'm going to need to fill. So this is some more work I need you guys to help me with. We got to create a job description. You guys have to set up job interviews. You've got to assist me, advise me on, of the candidates you bring in, why do you recommend them or whatever. And then we got to select somebody and then you have to make them an offer and figure out what their compensation is, blah, 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 right? All this work. Okay? So they go about it by initiating their process, right? The HR department has their process. Okay? Some managers don't employ recruiters. They say, you know what? I don't need some other person. I can do this myself. I've got to sit in on most of the job interviews anyway. So, I can save myself a bit of money and a bit of time by just doing it myself. I don't think it'll be that hard, right? When I was a functional manager, managing a business unit, I've told this story a few times. I asked around in my company, all the other managers that were general managers. I said, do you use recruiters or do you not use recruiters? And it was 50-50 because some people figured, look, they don't really add much. They take a bit of work off you, but there's some disadvantages. Other ones said, I do it myself. Other ones said, no, I use them, but yeah, they're not the be all end all. They help a bit. They take some of the grunt work away, right? So it's the hiring manager you need to talk to, right? Now imagine if that hiring manager had just come to the conclusion that they should hire someone, okay? Someone like you. Hiring some young kid who's got a lot of skills, a lot of energy. They're really enthusiastic about working in this business. That's who I'm looking for, right? And they're available now, and they want to work here, right? And imagine if you had sent them a message at that point that says, hello, I'm here. I do this kind of work. I'm really excited to work in this business, and I'd like to work for you guys. I know the work you guys do, and I find it very exciting. If ever you're looking for someone like that, please let me know. I'd love to work for you, all right? What do you think that hiring manager is going to do? They're probably going to reach out to you, and they say, hey, here's a person. Let's check them out. Now, if they work out, great. This doesn't have to go any further. Let's get them on board. If they don't work out, then maybe we can keep looking. And if we really don't find anyone, then we can maybe post it, right? Okay. 80% of the jobs that exist are not posted. Only 20% of them are. So all the jobs you see posted out there on places like Indeed and, Jobzilla and all of those things you see, that's only 20% of the jobs that are actually out there. Okay. Usually not the good ones. And these days, it's something like 30 or 40% of them are fake, as I understand. So you might not have a lot of experience if you're like a new grad, okay? But you know what? That really doesn't matter for a lot of jobs that you're eligible for. You don't need a ton of experience. All this crap about an entry-level job that requires 5 years of experience, that's crap. It's clearly not an entry-level job. They're just mixing words. They'd like to pay you like it's an entry-level job, but they're wanting someone that's not an entry-level candidate. It's stupid. Good luck with that one. Right? So you can get these jobs by employing networking. And networking, as I just said, it's a huge umbrella. There's a lot of things in that umbrella, a lot of different types of activities, right? What I've described is something called direct outreach, where you just reach out to the person directly. You don't know them. You just send them that little message. It's probably the simplest networking activity that introverts can do. You don't have to meet anyone face to face, right? You don't have to go to any events or meetings, right? You could do this from the comfort of your own home. And all you need is Google Maps and LinkedIn. Now, if you want to know what that looks like I just said maybe 20 minutes ago, there's a link in the description box of this live stream, just below this live stream. It's a link to a video on my channel called How Successful People Get Jobs. How Successful People Get Jobs. Watch that video. That describes it, okay? And what that does is you're going around the entire HR organization. Okay? Instead of talking about how good you are, you're demonstrating how good you are. First of all, you're demonstrating your initiative to even do this, right? Most people don't do this, but you are doing it. That elevates you above the crowd. Then it also signals your enthusiasm for this particular type of work, right? You're not going to do this to for any company that has any kind of job. You're only going to do it for the ones that you actually want to work for, right? So that's something else that signals, where your passion is. It's almost like volunteering activity. You don't get paid for it. The only people that do it are people that genuinely want to do that type of work. It's a very powerful signal. Then, can you string a sentence together? What are your communication skills? Basically, can you make yourself understood? Are you persuasive? Now, if you're effective in doing this, you're obviously saying something professional. There's nothing inappropriate. There's no red flags. And you're also at least somewhat persuasive when you want to be, which are great traits. So you're demonstrating all this stuff by doing it. So the reason they would want to talk to you is not because you're talking up how great you are. It's because you've shown how great you are. That's an advantage over candidates in a job interview. They're there to talk about how good they are and what they have. You're showing it by doing this. Okay, and that's how you get an advantage, and that's why people would hire you over someone else. The other icing on the cake here is that how many people are doing this? Not nearly as many as that are competing for the posted jobs. So you have far less competition. You might have maybe one or even two other people competing for this instead of 800 that are applying for the posted job. So there's multiple advantages. So for that reason alone, I highly recommend you check out this world. Be aware that this is a thing. You don't have to take my word for any of this. Go do your own research, get your information from a variety of sources, learn about it. Okay, that's how you can get a job when you don't have any experience. That's how you can get a job when you're changing careers. That's how you can get a job when you've got like a weird big work gap. That's how you can get a job when you've got all kinds of, non-standard things like disabilities, whatever. Because people see how awesome you are and you're elevating yourself way above the crowd by doing this. That's what gets you the job. That's what makes people want to employ you and pick you instead of anyone else. So check it out. Okay, there's this whole universe of stuff there, right? Okay, where did I leave off here? That's Art Sim. So hopefully that was useful, Art Sim. Mohammed says, should I try to negotiate a job offer when I desperately need to leave my current job, especially considering that this new job will open possibilities and I would probably be making more in a very short period of time, a year or so? Well, that's up to you, Mohammed. I can't give you an answer to that. It depends on what your goals are, what your exact situation is, and the details of this offer, right? And like what's reasonable for you, for someone in your position. You know what I mean? I can't answer that. Obviously, it's an option for you if you're currently employed, but if you must get out of that role very quickly, negotiation is about options. Now, if you only have this one viable option, which is getting this job, that doesn't leave you with a lot of negotiating power. The way you get negotiating power is you have multiple options, right? If this doesn't work out, that's fine. I go with this one. If that doesn't work out, that's fine because I got this one over here, right? So I don't need you to agree with me. I'm just telling you, you need to pay me X or sorry, no deal. That's up to you to decide how you're going to act on that. If you walk away from it, that's fine. I'm still making this much from this offer, right? So the more options you get, the more job offers you can get, or at the very least, the more job interviews you have lined up, you have potentially other options. That's what gives you power in a negotiation. If you don't have any other options, you really don't have any power, it would be very risky to negotiate. It's better to just take it, get it, and then see where you land. And then if it's still not perfect for you, you want to do better, then keep looking, because the more options you have, the further you'll go. Sarah Bell says, what is the best short message you can ask a recruiter or hiring manager when reaching out on LinkedIn? I wouldn't reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. I don't know what a short, it depends what your goal is. I can't tell you what the message would be until I know what you're going after. Like if you're contacting a recruiter, like what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to get special information on the job, or, if they've posted or something? Is that what you're doing? Right? There's and like for hiring managers, there's multiple things you could be asking for. You could be asking for a job. You could be asking for an informational interview. You could be asking for a meeting. It depends what you're looking for. There's all kinds of reasons why you would reach out to somebody. So there is no best message. If you can give me more of an insight into what you're trying to achieve, Sarah, I'll be happy to elaborate. Internet Vibe says, in a Zoom interview, is it fine to look at the camera the whole time? Yeah. Like, okay, you can see okay, I'm not in a Zoom interview, but I've got a similar setup, right? I'm sitting at a desktop computer and I've got a camera on top, and I'm looking down reading the chat feed. But when I look at the camera, I'm looking like this. Now, as a default thing, you would want to more or less look at the camera, right? As opposed to, say, looking down the whole time or looking off to the side, like looking at notes or whatever. It's more engaging to look at the person. It's like you're looking people in the eyes, right? Now, you can't always do that if you're referring to notes or whatever. But if you're not referring to notes and you're not reading something, as a default, I would say, look right at the camera. You know, that's what you would do in real life if you were sitting across the table from somebody, right? Unless you're looking down at papers or whatever, or notes, you'd be looking at the other person in the eyes, right? As a standard kind of thing. You know, now you don't have like like the Hulk Hogan gaze there, like kind of like this, right? That those people do, where it's like really intense, right? And you can look away, occasionally, right? You can look down and, back up, but more or less you're pretty much looking at the camera, right? So it's perfectly fine, and it's preferable unless you need to read something in the vicinity, shall we say. Mohammed says, thanks so much, Bill, you're the best. Well, thank you, Mohammed. That was an intelligent question. And I appreciate you saying that. That's very gracious of you. Okay, it's been an hour and a half. Check out my courses. If you want to go deeper with me, if you want to learn the networking thing, especially for networking for introverts, check out that course. That is all my teaching, all my advice for job seekers all in one place. And it'll teach you two things. One, it'll teach you how to apply for jobs in the posted job market. Okay, and do conventional job interviews and that stuff. Very similar to what's on my channel, basically. But also, what's not basically included in my channel is how to get jobs on the hidden job market. And it's particularly tailored to if you're an introvert. I basically use this technique to build up a consulting business. So, I've walked the talk every step of the way. I mean, so if you're interested in learning that with me, check out that course right here. There's a link in the description box, and I've also made FAQ videos about all my courses, including that one. So you can watch a video that talks about the course, how it works, what you get, so it's as transparent as possible. If you are looking for not necessarily how to get a job, but how to get promoted, how to climb the ladder, how to be seen as like a candidate for management type jobs and that kind of thing, check out that course. In order to put yourself forward and be seen as a candidate for those positions, there's several things you have to tack on to just having technical skills. One is people management skills, another is financial skills, and then yet another is above average communication skills. That's what that course is about. So I took all the learning that I did over the course of my career that enabled me to bone up on my communication skills and put myself forward for management type positions, eventually being a CEO. And I put them all into that course. So if you're interested in learning that, check out that course. Once again, there's a link in the description box under this live stream. And I've done a video on that course explaining how it works, what you get, all the rest of it. It's a pretty popular course, actually. So check it out if that's what you're looking to learn. I have another course that I don't really mention too much because it's slightly different. It's if you want to learn business. So if you are, if you're wanting to understand employers more, this is mainly for like entrepreneurs who'll probably be interested in it, but people with conventional careers, they can definitely benefit from this. Business is the scientific study of essentially how to make money. That's what it is. So learning about how to make money is a good thing. And the gold standard for that knowledge is a Master's of Business Administration, an MBA. For what it's worth, I've got an MBA. Now, I put that course together. It's technically a program, but it teaches you all the same stuff you would learn in a brick and mortar MBA program at a university. It doesn't cost you 5 figures. It costs you $100, a tiny fraction of what it would cost. The catch is that it's unaccredited and it's self-study. Now, for some people, this will tie in with what they're looking for because it means that you can do it on your own time, on your own schedule, and more importantly, if you're only interested in learning a subset of business, maybe you just care about marketing, or you just care about, accounting, finance, and economics, and that's it. You can just learn those, right? But what you're doing is you're getting a reading list, and you're reading the textbooks that are used in some of the world's most popular MBA programs, including places like Harvard Business School in their MBA program. So you're getting the same textbook. You're learning the same material. It's just that you're reading it at home on your own schedule, on your own time, and you can go the depth to which you're interested. If you just want to skim it, that's perfectly fine. If you want to go really in depth, you can. It's whatever you're wanting to look at. Business knowledge is very, very useful. And I think that some schools and universities these days are really acting like gatekeepers of it. All the information is out in the public domain. I think it's criminal to charge people like $100,000 to teach this stuff. It's like you can buy the books off Amazon. It's the same books they're using, and you can read it yourself. You could get, pretty much the entire benefit from it yourself without paying that kind of price tag. So I feel very strongly about this. That's why I created that course. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, check it out. I have live streams on Mondays that talk about entrepreneurship and startups. I have live stream on Fridays where I talk about private equity and buying businesses and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of more my core competency. So this is kind of a companion to that stuff if anyone's interested. Links in the description box under this live stream. Flame says, I have an interview for TTEC. I don't know what that is. May 6th. Any advice? Well, not knowing what TTC is, just any job interview. I mean, May 6th, that's still a few days away. So here's what I would say. To prepare properly for a job interview, this is what I recommend, okay? Phase 1 is just learn all the answers to the common job interview questions. There's about 10 of those, right? And then get 10 stories together that you're going to use to answer pretty much any behavioral question they'll throw at you, right? Behavioral questions are, usually they start out with, tell me about a time. So everyone will have their own answer because everyone has their own experiences, right? So there's no way you could memorize custom answers to every possible behavioral question because there's millions of behavioral questions that people could conceivably ask, right? So the way you do it is you memorize 10 stories, you vet them, you make sure you practice telling them in that compact format, like the STAR format, just so you can tell the entire story in under a minute, right? And practice that. And then if you feel like you've done that, what I then recommend that you do, it's kind of phase 2 of 2, which is do mock interviews. So for most people, what probably works the best is just grab a friend or a family member and just say, hey, can you help me out? Let's do some pretend job interviews. You be the interviewer and I'll be the candidate. And we're going to practice this. And this is all so that I get some practice, right? We're going to simulate a job interview for me and we're going to do it a few times and practice makes perfect, right? So either you could give them a list of questions or they make up the questions and you do it like it was a real job interview. And if you do 3 or 4 of those a day, what I recommend ideally is for 2 weeks, like 5 weekdays and then 5 weekdays. So that's 10 days, ideally, 3 or 4 a day. That's 40 practice interviews. Okay. At the end of that, you will know the answer to every question inside and out, backwards and forwards. You'll feel a lot more confident because you've been asked all this stuff so many times before, right? And that will really prepare you. Okay. Now that's a bit of work, but I mean, I know in your case you've got like what, 6 days, something like that, but you could do something very close to this if you really wanted to. That's the best kind of preparation you can do. What executives and stuff do is they like hire HR like recruitment firms and things to like provide this service. They do mock interviews. Instead of a friend or family member, they're sitting down with an actual recruiter that's doing a mock interview, right? I do a collaborative live stream every 2 weeks on this channel. I do a joint live stream. It's me and a recruiter that kind of do like this, where we answer questions. The recruiter's name is Abby. She's from a YouTube channel called Life Work Balance, right? Life Work Balance. And like she's an actual recruiter. So I know that like I'm not an interview coach, but she is, and what she has said is that what a lot of people will do is they'll just book like one session with her and do like a mock interview kind of like over, like remotely over the computer. And, she can give you some feedback and say like, here's what I think you should maybe change or not say, or say this instead, and just one session she claims like is very helpful. And that makes sense to me. I'm not necessarily trying to plug her services for her, but, I'm just saying like, that's another option you have. Okay. If you really want to like, just prepare as best you can. Okay. So between all of that, I think you got some options there, hopefully. TTEC says Teletech. Okay, great. I've never heard of that company. I'm in Canada, by the way. So like, I don't know where you are, but, I talk to people from all over the world and from in every industry. So I'm just not familiar with everything. It's for a customer service representative position for TTEC. I don't have anyone to recreate a mock interview. Okay. Well, you don't have any friends or family members. Like there's nobody around that can give you a hand with this. You could always pay for that service. I think it's unnecessary. I think it's beyond most people's means to do this like fully. But if you wanted just a sanity check, I would check out that idea of like, booking one session, like a 1 hour session or something with someone like Abby or someone else. You could maybe get some benefit just as a sanity check to make sure that there isn't any obvious things that you should maybe be doing. But I mean, if you've done all the preparation and stuff, I suppose if you don't have anyone to do it with, I suppose you could do it yourself in front of the mirror. That's better than nothing, Flame says it's international, but I reside in the USA. Okay, no problem. So I mean, those are some options for you. Like mock interviews are ideal because then you make your rookie mistakes at home. You know what I mean? Instead of like making your rookie mistakes in actual job interviews, potentially blowing the interview because you did something kind of basic and you learned, never do that again, kind of thing. Or that's a bad answer, instead say something else, right? It just allows you to make all your rookie mistakes like in a harmless way, so it's not actually having any detriment. Okay. Oh, you say that's true. I'm going to try that. Okay. Well, good. Yeah. There's people that offer those kind of services, like, remotely, like you can do it over the computer. A lot of people offer that kind of stuff. So check them out, I mean, there's also job interviews where I forget what the name is, but they get you to record yourself in a video. Like that's the latest thing, like that's catching on now. That's been around forever, by the way, but it's only starting to catch on now. And I don't like it. It's like, it's going further and further in serving the employer and not you. You know what I mean? They like it as a video, so then they can turn it off. If, in the first 10 seconds you give like a red flag, it's like, okay, next. Yeah, they like it. It serves them really well, but it's not necessarily the best thing for you. all the more reason to push people towards networking. You go around all these systems. You don't have to submit to this and be a slave. You decide who you talk to, and if you know how to approach somebody, you know what to say, it brings even more prominence to the hidden job market. TGC is weird. They have 2 interviews, and the first one is just to get to know you. They ask about you, they ask about your family and how you heard about the company and why you want to work for them. Yeah, it sounds really charming. I don't think your family is relevant to talk about, especially first. You know what I mean? But whatever. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Well, it's been nearly 2 hours. There are 26 people here. You guys are awesome. You're doing some self-improvement, so I know you're on the right track. Learn all you can. Do the best you can. And you're going to come out on top. This is not a fun time. When you're between jobs, times like this are never easy. But regardless of how it feels, it is temporary. It is very temporary. Okay? And once you get that yes, you forget all about this period of your life. You can barely remember it. You know what I mean? And it's a good thing. So, don't be fooled. And don't take rejection as some kind of statement that you're unemployable or you have no value. Nothing could be further from the truth. There's a lot of bad employers out there, especially in the posted job market, and being rejected by them is actually a blessing in disguise. So don't take it too hard. Okay? You're doing fine. Out there's an employer that's looking right now for someone just like you. Okay? That's what they're doing, right? But they're over here looking here. You're over here looking around. You're not connected to each other. That's the problem. Okay, so do all you can to learn about the hidden job market. That's what I'd recommend. Not a lot of people talk about the hidden job market. Why is that? It's because mostly the people talking about getting hired are recruiters, and it's a conflict of interest for a recruiter to tell you that you don't need to go through a recruiter to get a job. You know what I'm saying? There's a definite sort of incentive for them not to talk about this, but do your own research. Tune into this stuff. Go ask ChatGPT about it. Ask Google about it. It's pretty out there. It's pretty obvious. Okay, so if you're not tuned into this, learn of its existence, learn what it is, and then once you're convinced that this is like definitely a thing, then learn what you can about trying to get hired. I've got resources for you. Other people have resources that can help you. And then you learn by doing. You learn by applying it, just like you get better at job interviews by going to a lot of job interviews. You learn the techniques and then you go apply them, right? And when you've done something, you've done it with your own hands and you've seen it with your own eyes, nobody can tell you you can't do it that way. So that's what I recommend. If you're wondering, like we got somebody saying, I'm a fresh grad, how do I get a job? Like, start doing some of this stuff. The more you do, the more experience you get, the more you are confident in your own abilities. Okay, so check it out. I got stuff on my YouTube channel. I've got courses for people that want to go deeper, especially that one. And I will be back on Friday. I'm doing another edition of Honest HR Nitrous in the afternoon on Friday. So if you have any more questions, you can come back and ask me. Until then, I wish you the best of luck. I see Flame is here. Flame says, thank you for the insights. You're absolutely welcome, Flame. I learned about the hidden job market because of your videos. After I got the job and work for a little while, I'm going to find out what they have on the hidden job market. Yes, the sooner you do that, the sooner you can find out about a lot of great opportunities. Okay, take care, everyone. See you soon.